Hi there, my name is Bev, and today I'm going to be doing the end of the year book tag as well as sharing my reading resolutions for the next year. This one is for all my planners out there. If you like organizing and planning your next goals, your next move, then stay tuned because I'm going to be giving you a peek into what my plans are and maybe they'll suit you as well. The end of the year book tag was originally done by Ariel, and when she first put it out, it was in September. And so the original intention of this tag is to talk about what your reading plans are for the end of the year, not so much as a wrap up for ending the year. I don't know if I'm explaining that properly, but looking at the questions, I'm actually a little bit late to this tag, but let's roll with it anyway. I'm getting into this now because this past weekend was my birthday, and I think it's really fun to treat your birthday as kind of a year mile marker. For me, since my birthday's in early November, I essentially am just getting a head start on my New Year's resolutions. I like to get my head in the game early. So without further ado, let's get into the tag questions. The first question is, are there any books that you've started this year that you still have to finish? And yes, definitely, I need to call myself out on House of Leaves by Danielewski. This book is very weird, very dense, and kind of hard to get through. I feel like this question is really asking if there's maybe a book that I DNF'd and just need to come back to later, and I don't really have that. This book I did start, but it's taking me a lot longer to get through than I originally anticipated. This book is very meta. It's an annotation done by the editors of one man's annotation of yet another man's paper on another man's film that he made about this creepy house that he moved into with his family. There are so many layers. You can probably tell just from that description why it is not super easy to get through. It's not like this book isn't entertaining. It absolutely is, but it is a real thinker. It takes a bit to kind of sit through even just a couple of pages and then try and understand what it is you just read. I find myself having to go back and reread things, go and flip through some of the different appendixes that are in the back. Yeah. There's a lot to this. It's gonna be tough, but I just want to call out that I want to get this finished by the end of the year. The second question is, do you have an autumnal book to transition into the end of the year? So you can see from this question how late I really am to this. Autumn is quickly wrapping up and we're getting into winter, but nonetheless, I still do have Night Film by Marisha Pessl. I actually found this book on several different autumnal reading lists because it takes place in October, so we're gonna go with it. This is the most autumnal book that I have on my TBR right now. Night Film is a thriller about the death and investigation of a young woman whose father is a reclusive horror filmmaker. This woman has committed suicide, but there's a journalist that believes that there's more than meets the eye going on with the story. This journalist has gone after the filmmaker in the past, and it did not go well for him. He was severely discredited, so he's really got a bone to pick with this guy, and maybe nothing left to lose. So I'm looking forward to reading this. It should be a really fun thriller. I think there's some interactive elements, maybe websites or different documents to get into so that you can kind of be a part of the investigation. I don't know how accurate that is. I just read that in one place. But either way, I think it's gonna be a fun one. The third question is there a new release that you're still waiting for? And the answer is no, not really. I didn't have anything that I was honestly waiting for, so I looked at some lists at what new releases were still left in the year. I did find out, though, that there's a book coming out from a podcast that I used to listen to, and that is Stuff You Should Know, an incomplete compendium to mostly interesting things by Josh Clark and Chuck Bryant. Stuff You Should Know is one of the first podcasts that I ever got into years and years ago, so I've spent so many hours with these guys, it's kind of ridiculous. What they do on Stuff You Should Know is they just pick a topic and go deep, discuss it with one another. They each kind of take different aspects of the topic to research, and then when they come back together to record the episode, they're kind of learning at the same time that they're sharing their information. They cover such a wide variety of things. It's like one episode will be about Mexican wrestling, the next episode is about diamonds, or baby boomers, or Rasputin. It's wild. There's really no limit to what they could be talking about. I've learned so many fun little tidbits from them. So apparently the book that's coming out strikes me as almost a great coffee table book, potentially. I haven't gotten a good look at what it is, but maybe that's the case. If you remember, I did a coffee table book video where I talked about my collection and how much I like those, so check that out if you want to see some other fun coffee table books. But This Stuff You Should Know book apparently has a lot of graphical elements, which of course you don't get in a podcast form. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they have to say about some different topics, as well as like charts, images. So yeah, I think it's gonna be a cool edition and I'll definitely be checking it out. Question number 4 is, what are 3 books that you want to read before the end of the year? The first one I'll share is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. This one I showed off in my first haul video. This is one of the books from that video that I wanted to read the soonest, but I still haven't gotten around to it. I'm not sure why. I'm very much a mood reader and the mood just hasn't struck me yet, but I'm really excited. I keep on seeing things about how good this book is. Every time I come across somebody talking about this book or another person summing up their thoughts on it, it just makes me want to read it that much more. So it's definitely getting hot on my TBR. The second book I'll talk about is Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo. This one has been hanging out on my bookshelf forever, and I never got around to reading it. This is one of my 8 books that will self-destruct in 8 months, and when I talked about the synopsis on this, when I looked into it for that video, I was so excited. It sounds so cool and like such a heartbreaker. Clearly I just bought it for the cover, but now that I do know what it's about, I'm very excited to read it. I definitely do not want to lose this to my kind of self-destruct challenge, so I gotta get it done, gotta make sure that it gets read because I definitely want to hang on to it. The third book that I'll put on the list is Transcendent Kingdom by gyasi. I read Homegoing by gyasi earlier this year for my book club, and it's definitely a contender for one of the best books of the year. Certainly one of the best books that I've read ever in my life. So of course, when Transcendent Kingdom came out, I had to get my hands on a copy. This one's a signed copy, so I am really pleased to have it in my collection, but I definitely don't intend for it to languish on my shelf. I definitely want to get this one done and see what gyasi has to say in her second novel. Question number 5. Is there a book you think could still shock you and become your favorite book of the year? Shock me? No, probably not. I feel like I really understand the books that I'm picking. Like before I even start reading something, I know if it's gonna be something that I just kind of enjoy or if it's gonna be something that I'm gonna love. So all of the books that I really loved this year that are the very top, nothing was a surprise. I knew they were gonna be good. But I do have a couple books that I feel that way about right now, and they are from my fantasy list. It's gonna be The 5th Season by N.K. Jemisin and The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I'm so excited to read these. I ranked the different aspects of a bunch of different fantasy books, and both of these actually came out with a 12 out of 12 ranking in my very scientific system. Since putting that video out, I've heard nothing but praise for these books in the comment section from you guys and also from other people in real life. So I am definitely looking forward to these. I think they are 100% contenders for some of my favorites of the year. And I'm really excited that they're fantasy books too. You know, again, the reason why I did that video is because I'm not a huge fantasy reader, but I want to be. So I'm really excited that I have some choice picks for my first deep, true foray into fantasy. And the final question is, have you already started making reading plans for 2021? So that leads us right into the second part of the video because yes, I have. So like I said earlier, I like to use my birthday as an opportunity to get a head start on New Year's resolutions. And so since I'm in my 30s, I thought it would be cute if I did 30 reading resolutions or reading challenges for the next year. So this is a really fun list to put together. The first half of it is kind of reading challenges, and then the back half is all new genres that I want to read a book from. So I'm gonna try to get through these pretty quick. I haven't done any of them yet, so I don't really have a lot to say other than explaining what it is. Let's just get into the list. My first goal is to read 100 books. Now, my goal for 2020 was to read 12 books, and I did that handily. Now, I've mentioned before that this is kind of the first year that I started to read a lot, and my rate of completion is pretty good. I'm on track to finish over 60 books this year, and I didn't even really start going for it until like July. I think 100 books is definitely a challenge, but also very doable. I've definitely never done something like that before, and I think it'll be really cool to be able to say that I've read 100 books in a year. I also want to read a full series. I've definitely read trilogies before, so when I'm talking series, I'm gonna classify that as 4 or more books. I'm gonna read an entire series. I want to complete half of a challenge. This is something that I may do a video on in the future, but I want to read a book from every single one of the 50 states in the US. I don't want to pigeonhole myself and allocate half of my entire year's reading list to this challenge, so I'm gonna say, let's do this challenge over 2 years and tackle half of it, get 25 states in. I would like to read an author's complete works. I want to write to an author that moved me. I'm going to read a biography of someone that I don't know. I want to read a book about a historical event. I'd like to read an annotated book, not annotated by the author. I want to read an English translation from a language that's new to me. I'm going to reread a book that I had to read in high school. I want to read a ridiculously long book, like over 750 pages. I want to read a book in one sitting, probably not the ridiculously long book, but you never know. I want to read a book written by someone over the age of 65. I want to reread one of my favorite books. And I want to read a self-published novel. So those are my first 15, and like I said, the last 15 are just different genres that I want to read a book from. Some of these are pretty typical genres that I just happen to not have read a book from, but some of them are kind of weird genres that I had never heard of before, so it's kind of a mix going on here. So I want to read poetry, I want to read a play, Nordic noir, bizarro fiction, a comedy of manners, a hard-boiled novel, picaresque, cyberpunk, epistolary, slipstream, western, gothic horror, holiday romance, Regency romance, and environmentalism. So while this video has very much been about the future and what I'm going to do, if you want to see what I already have done, make sure to check out my October wrap-up. You can see the books that I read over the last month and what I thought of them. But before you do that, don't forget to subscribe and also leave me a comment if any of these resolutions resonated with you. I'd love to know if we're gonna have some of the same goals. All right, well, I really appreciate you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next video.